to focus on Buddhism. Thanks to the generosity of certain donors who wish to remain anonymous, we are able to begin a new series of the Focus on Buddhism program. Every Tuesday night from 8:30 to 9 p.m, we will be broadcasting edited talks of well-known Buddhist teachers on various topics covering major aspects of Buddhism. Tonight, the speaker is Venerable Bhikkhu Bodhi from Washington, giving a brief biographical sketch of the Buddha. Here's Bhikkhu Bodhi.
In one sutta, the Buddha says that one who sees the Buddha sees the Dhamma. So one avenue of approach to seeing the Dhamma, the truth proclaimed by the Buddha, is by examining the teacher, by investigating the one who makes known the truth. Now the word Buddha is not a proper name, but an honorific title. The word Buddha thus means the one who has understood the truth, the enlightened one, the one who has awakened from the sleep of ignorance and who awakened others from the sleep of ignorance. He is the finder of truth and the proclaimer of truth. He is. The historical person we know as the Buddha was an Indian prince of the Shakya people living in northern India. He renounced his right to the throne, became a religious seeker early in his life, and then, after reaching enlightenment, he became a spiritual teacher. His given name was Siddhartha, and his family name Gautama. He was not called the Buddha in his early years, but he acquired this designation only in his 35th year, after he attained supreme enlightenment. However, when we say that the word Buddha is a title, this can be misleading. The word is actually not simply a title given to one particular individual, but it is a designation for a kind of individual. It represents not a single unique person, but a type of person. Now this raises a question. The question, what is a Buddha? What are the distinguishing qualities of this type of person that receives the designation Buddha? The man who accomplishes this twofold task of rediscovering the path to nirvana and of making it known again to the world, this person is called a Buddha. A Buddha does not arise as a deity of any kind, or as the incarnation of a god, an avatara, a prophet, or a divinely inspired messenger. He comes as a human being. He begins as a man caught up like ourselves in the round of suffering and defilement in which all beings are caught up. However, he is not an ordinary man, but an extraordinary man, immense potentials of intelligence, energy, and compassion which he has developed over countless lifetimes of self-cultivation. Throughout countless lifetimes, he has prepared himself for his future role as a Buddha by perfecting in himself the required qualities, the virtue, the powers, the wisdom needed by a world teacher. In his last existence, he quickly discerns the fundamental inadequacy of human life. Through his inner sense of mission, he goes forth to seek a way out of the bondage and suffering, and then, out of compassion, after discovering the way, he comes back to teach the path to the world at large. The Buddhas are not unique in achieving release from samsara. All those who follow it through, who follow the path through to the end, reach the same goal. These people are called arahants, accomplished ones, perfectly liberated ones. The specialty of the Buddha's function is the rediscovery and reproclamation of the path. Once it is known, those who learn the teaching can follow it through and reach the same goal. The second standpoint from which we can discuss the special nature of a Buddha is the standpoint of the qualities of a Buddha. And these can be dealt with from two angles, as the elimination of all defects and the achievement of excellent qualities. The elimination of all defects means that the Buddha has eliminated all defilements. Three basic defilements are greed, hatred, and delusion. A Buddha has eliminated all of these defilements totally, completely, and irreversibly. Then, from the second angle, the achievement of excellent qualities can be understood through the three excellent qualities, the three gunas, characteristic of the Buddha. These are his perfect purity, his great wisdom, and his great compassion. From this general account of the nature of a Buddha, we now come to consider the specific person known through history as the Buddha. His life, like that of most great religious teachers, has been adorned with miracles and legends. But from this mass of myth, a historical core can be found. And even the mythical element should not be dismissed as just pure fantasy, since much of it conveys important message at the doctrinal level. The Buddha's given name, as we mentioned, was Siddhartha. His family name was Gautama, and Buddhists know him as the Buddha Gautama, or the Buddha Shakyamuni. The dates for his life, accepted now by most historically oriented scholars, are 563 BC to 483 BC. Though other dates are also recognized. In his last life as a bodhisattva, the future Buddha took birth as the son of King Suddhodana and Queen Mahamaya. He took birth among the Shakyan people in the northern kingdom, small kingdom of northern India, in the foothills of the Himalayas, and he grew up in the capital city of the Shakyans, Kapilavatthu. Now the father, being a ruler himself, naturally didn't want his son to become an ascetic spiritual teacher. He wanted him to become a ruler, the proper heir to his throne. And so the father did everything he could to prevent his son from seeing the sufferings of the world. The young prince lived in luxury, always attended by musicians, dancers, and singers. He enjoyed himself in the company of youthful playmates, singing, dancing, playing in sports. Then when he reached manhood, his father arranged for him marriage with a beautiful princess, Yasodhara, and he lived happily with his wife in the palace. But when he reached his 29th year, he became increasingly reflective, more and more thoughtful. He began to wonder whether this was the ultimate goal of human life, pleasure, power, and fame, which were all transient and unreliable. Or he wondered, is there something more beyond this, something which is eternal and unchanging? His first encounter with the hard facts of life is told in the text in the form of a myth that expresses a real and powerful psychological awakening. According to this myth, up to his 29th year, the prince Siddhartha knew nothing at all about aging, sickness, and death. His father had arranged to screen him totally from exposure to these facts, and so he lived in a totally illusory world in which these hard facts of life were completely hidden from him. Then, when he reached maturity, curiosity led him to wonder what life was like outside the palace. And so one day he ordered his charioteer to prepare the chariot for him, and the two went riding throughout the kingdom. And in the course of this outing, he saw 4 sights which determined his future destiny. The first sight he saw was that of an old man. He asked his driver, "What is that?" The driver said, "That is an old man." "Yes, what is an old man?" The driver explained, "All youth eventually leads to old age. Nobody remains young forever. But as the years go by, eventually the hair turns gray, the skin wrinkles. One reaches a state like that. Am I subject to that also? You and everybody else, we're all subject to old age." Then, as they drove further, he saw a sick man lying by the side of a road. The same kind of exchange went on. Now he saw for himself, for the first time, the fact of sickness. As they went a little further, he saw the third sight. He saw a funeral procession. These sights aroused in him an understanding that shattered all of his illusions, all his hopes and dreams for the future. He realized that even though he now enjoyed the beauty and the glory of youth, that youth ends in old age. He saw that health succumbs to sickness, that life ends in death. And as these thoughts bore into his mind, his satisfaction with the luxury of the palace life fell away. Then he saw a 4th sight. This was a samana, an ascetic walking for alms in the town, walking very peacefully and serenely, carrying an alms bowl. The prince now knew the direction in which he had to move. And so he decided to leave the palace and to follow the quest for spiritual truth, seeking a way out of the round of suffering, of aging and death, by entering upon the life of an ascetic. So one night, this was on the same day that his wife Yasodhara had given birth to his first son, Rahula. That night, while everyone in the palace was asleep, he left the palace, got onto his horse, and went many miles from the city of Kapilavatthu and stopped at the edge of a forest. There he removed his princely garments, replaced them with the stitched robes of an ascetic, cut off his hair and his beard, and he entered the forest, seeking a way to deliverance. Young prince, the young seeker, we can now call the Bodhisattva, went to the best-known teachers. He mastered their philosophies, he practiced their forms of meditation to the highest point. What was wrong with them was that these forms of meditation focused exclusively on concentration, samadhi, rather than panya, wisdom. They led to higher states of consciousness, to rapturous bliss, to stillness and calm of the mind, to deep stages of absorption. But they didn't lead to insight into truth, to awakening, to enlightenment, and therefore they were inadequate. So the Bodhisattva abandoned these teachers and their systems and threw himself deeper into the forest in order to enter upon a new path for himself, the path of self-mortification. However, the Bodhisattva found that all of these austerities only proved futile. They didn't lead to any enlightenment, to any state of higher wisdom. They led only to the wasting of the body and to the weakening of the mental faculties. He understood that for the mind to function properly at full capacity, the body had to be strong and healthy. He understood that for the mind to function properly at full capacity, the body had to be strong and healthy. And therefore he decided to abandon this course of self-mortification and to resume taking food again. And so one day, after he had taken his alms, he came to a beautiful spot by the bank of a river, found a nice shady area beneath a tree, which is later to be called the Bodhi tree, the tree of enlightenment. He prepared himself a seat of grass, sat down, folded his legs in the cross-legged posture, and when he sat there, he then made a firm resolution, a determination in his mind. He said, "Let my flesh waste away until only bones and skin remain, but I will not budge from this seat. I will not unlock my legs until I have reached supreme enlightenment, until I have found the way to deliverance." Then there took place the struggle for enlightenment. As evening descended, a tremendous internal struggle waged itself within the mind of the seeker, a struggle against all the defilements, all the attachments, the ignorance and afflictions. Then, with his mind calm and concentrated, the realizations of wisdom begin to unfold. He penetrates the deepest truths of the Dhamma. He discovers the law of dependent arising, Paticca Samuppada. He develops vipassana, insight into the real characteristics of all things. And he arrives at the realization of the Four Noble Truths. At the end of the night, his mind is liberated from all the screens of ignorance. And he sits beneath the Bodhi tree, no longer a bodhisattva, a seeker of enlightenment, but now a finder of enlightenment, a Sama Sambuddha. In the first discourse, the Buddha then explains to them the middle way. He says that he has not abandoned the higher aspirations, but in fact that he's achieved the supreme goal. He says that he's discovered the middle way, the noble eightfold path, which avoids the extremes of indulgence and luxury on the one hand, and the extreme of self-mortification on the other hand. Then he goes on to proclaim the Four Noble Truths and to tell how his discovery of the Four Noble Truths issued in his enlightenment. In the months ahead, the Buddha's following expands by leaps and by bounds. He soon gathers around himself a group of young men who enter the order and with a little bit of teaching achieve arhatship. At the end of the first rains retreat, the Buddha gathers the 60 disciples around him, who are all arhants, and then he sends them out into the world to spread the liberating message of the Dhamma. And in his talk, he emphasizes compassion, the motive for teaching. The Buddha himself then commenced his long career of wandering that was to lead him from town to town, from village to village in northern India. In the second year after his enlightenment, he visited his home city of Kapilavatthu, and he taught the Dhamma to his family. Many of his relatives, including his father in former life, embraced the Dhamma and reached various stages of enlightenment. His son Rahula became a novice monk, and his wife Yasodhara became a laywoman, and afterwards became a bhikkhuni, a nun. Time doesn't allow us to deal with the details of the Buddha's ministry here, but the question can be raised why the Dhamma spread so rapidly, why it had such drawing power. These questions are especially important to us because the answers aren't confined to any single time period or country, but bring us to what is universal in the Buddha's teaching, hence to what is relevant to us right here and now. I think the rapid spread of the Buddha's Dhamma can be understood through the aim of the teaching and through the method that the Buddha lays down to achieve that aim. The Buddha's teaching speaks directly to the central problem at the core of human existence, the problem of suffering, and it offers to show a way out of suffering to perfect peace, to unconditioned happiness. The entire doctrine of the Buddha flows between these 2 points, suffering and the end of suffering. Every other consideration, all the speculations, the metaphysical concerns, the dogmatic subtleties that often infest religion, all of these are set aside as irrelevant. And not only does the Buddha make suffering and its cessation the focal point of his teaching, but he deals with the problem in a very realistic way, a way that is personal and immediate, a way that can be verified in our own experience. He traces suffering to its roots right in our own mind, in our own greed, our hatred, our delusion, and he holds that the cure, the solution, also has to be found in our minds, in purifying our minds from all of these defilements. As a result of this diagnosis, the Buddha rejects all extraneous religious forms which involve external reliances, the performance of rituals and sacrifices, the appeal to authoritative books, reliance on priests and saviors, the reliance on divine figures to grant us salvation. The Buddha emphasizes that self-reliance is the key to deliverance. As the way to deliverance, he holds up purified conduct and correct understanding. And even the Buddha functions simply as a teacher of the path, not as a savior who grants salvation. The Buddha points out that the path to the end of suffering has to be followed, each one by himself. The Buddha can show the path, but each person has to follow it according to his own energy and his own understanding. For this reason, the Buddha rejects the call for blind faith and belief. He doesn't want disciples who merely believe in him or accept his doctrine out of respect or through faith, but he asks his followers to examine his teaching, to investigate it, until they become convinced of it themselves. Another appeal of the Dhamma that accounts for its rapid spread, I think, lies in its universality. The Buddha taught the Dhamma freely and openly to all who are willing to listen. He says, "Open to all are the gates of the deathless." His doctrine deals with the most universal problem, the problem of suffering, and hence he placed no restrictions on the people to whom it should be taught. The Buddha taught to people of all social classes. He had no esotericism. There was nothing secret, hidden, or concealed, nothing reserved only for the initiated. Another feature of the Buddha's method, I think, which accounts for its rapid spread, was his skillful means. And the Buddha taught his doctrine in a graduated way, not in a demanding way, but in a way which led gradually upward. And so the Buddha taught for 45 years, from his 35th year up to his 80th year. As he approached his 80th year, he knew that he had accomplished his mission. His doctrine had become widespread and fruitful. He had established the Sangha, the order of monks and nuns. And there were now large numbers of people, monks and nuns, laymen and laywomen, who had mastered the teaching, had opened enlightenment, and could see to the continued transmission of the Dhamma. As the Buddha was now old, his strength was failing, he was occasionally sick, and so he decided the time had come for his parinirvana, his final passing away. He set out on his last journey accompanied by Ananda, his personal attendant, and by the order of monks. He traveled to the town of Kusinara, a small town in northern India. There he lay down between two twin sal trees. He gathered his disciples around him. He gave them a last discourse, and then he exhorted them. He said, "O my disciples, all conditioned things are impermanent, subject to destruction. Work out your salvation with diligence." These were the Buddha's last words. He then entered into successive stages of meditation, and from there attained parinirvana, the final passing away. His body was carried to the eastern gate of Kusinara, and there the chiefs of the town cremated it with the honors due to a universal monarch.
They say that one who sees with eyes like blazing wisdom suns the sufferings of all beings will weep for evil he has done. Who would have guessed the Buddha's light illumines the place beyond space and time? Who would have guessed that all along the treasure of his wisdom lies within your own mind? Great is the joy, great is the joy, great is the joy within my heart. What you are is what you have done. What you do, you will become. Don't keep looking.
That was Bhikshuni Hen Yin singing words of Buddha's wisdom. This program comes to a close now, but before we leave you, we would like to inform our listeners that a new Buddhist library is now open at 2nd floor, 392 Sussex Street, Sydney. Also, on Saturday the 26th of October, there will be a one-day seminar at the Buddhist Library on Buddhist philosophy. For further information, ring 797-8085, 797-8085. A month-long retreat, led by Venerable U Pandita Sayadaw from Burma, is being held at Baradu from the 4th of November. For further information, ring 042 673240, 042 673240. This program was brought to you by the Buddha Dharma Society of Sydney. May you all be well and happy.